You have until Friday to tear it down or we file a lien on your home. That's what the president of my HOA said to me, standing on my driveway, arms crossed, sunglasses on, like she was reciting a line from a movie where she was the hero. She had no idea I was already holding the one piece of paper that would end her career on that board. My name is Rachel Ellison. I'm 34, I work remote as a claims analyst, and 3 years ago my husband Mark and I bought our first house on Larkspur Court in a quiet, manicured little pocket of suburbia called Willow Creek Estates. It's the kind of neighborhood you see in real estate brochures. Trimmed hedges. Mailboxes that all match. A community newsletter that goes out every first Sunday of the month, usually reminding everyone that trash cans need to be inside the garage by 6 p.m. When we moved in, our real estate agent handed us a thick folder of HOA documents and said with a little laugh, "Just don't paint your door the wrong shade of blue." I laughed too. I didn't think much of it. Mark and I had wanted a starter home with a yard for years, and Willow Creek had good schools nearby, low crime, and a small but sturdy sense of community. Neighbors waved. People organized a 4th of July potluck. It felt safe. The HOA board met the second Tuesday of every month in the clubhouse off Birchwood Lane, and for the first 2 years I never once set foot in that building. I paid my dues, $210 a month on time every time. I mowed on schedule. I kept my fence stained the approved shade of cedar mist. I was, by every measure, the kind of homeowner an HOA board dreams about. Quiet, compliant, invisible. That changed the spring I decided to build a shed. Mark and I had been renovating the garage into a home gym, which meant our lawn equipment, the mower, the trimmer, 3 bikes, and a growing collection of gardening tools needed somewhere to live. So in March, I did what I thought was the responsible thing. I pulled up the HOA's Architectural Guidelines PDF from their community portal, found the section on accessory structures, and read it twice. Maximum footprint 120 square feet. Maximum height 10 feet at the peak. Setback 5 feet from the rear property line, 10 from the side. I ordered a prefabricated shed online, 118 square feet, 9 feet 6 inches at the peak, and hired a local contractor named Tomas to install it on a gravel pad in the back left corner of my yard, 6 feet off the rear line. I submitted the architectural review request form on April 2nd, attached the manufacturer specs, and waited the mandatory 30 days. Nobody objected in writing. Under the HOA's own bylaws, Section 4.3, no written objection within 30 days meant automatic approval. The shed went up the second week of May. For 6 weeks, nothing happened. Then, on a Tuesday evening in late June, I found a bright yellow notice zip-tied to my mailbox. That's when Diane Kessler entered my life. Diane had been HOA president for 11 years. Everyone on Larkspur Court knew her, and most people were careful around her, the way you're careful around a dog that's never actually bitten anyone but growls a lot. She drove a white Lexus SUV with a proud Willow Creek board member decal on the back window, and she had a habit of walking the neighborhood in the early evening with a small notebook, jotting down infractions like a school hall monitor who never graduated out of the role. The notice on my mailbox read, "Notice of violation, accessory structure exceeds permitted dimensions, immediate correction required." No square footage listed, no measurements, just a threat with a deadline 5 days out. I called the HOA management office the next morning. The woman who answered, a part-timer named Brenda, told me Diane had personally walked the property line with a tape measure and determined the shed violated setback and size restrictions. I asked for her measurements in writing. Brenda said she'd follow up. She never did. 3 days later, Diane showed up at my door herself. Sunglasses on, clipboard in hand, that same white Lexus idling at the curb like she expected this to take 30 seconds. "Mrs. Ellison," she said, not quite smiling, "that shed is a clear violation. It's oversized, it's too close to the property line, and frankly, it's an eyesore from the Henderson's patio." I submitted an ARC request in April, I said. It was approved by default under Section 4.3, no objection came back. Diane's expression didn't move. That form must have gotten lost. These things happen. Regardless, the structure violates current guidelines and needs to come down, or the board will proceed with fines starting at $50 a day. $50 a day. I did the math in my head before she'd even finished the sentence. $1,500 a month for something I'd followed every rule to build. "I have the approval email," I said. "I have the specs, I have the contractor's measurements." The shed is 118 square feet, 9.5 feet at the peak, 6 feet off the rear line. It's compliant. "I measured it myself," Diane said, tapping her clipboard. "It's not compliant. I'd hate for this to escalate, Mrs. Ellison." Fridays are lien filing days at the county recorder's office. That's the line. That's the moment on my driveway I opened with. She said it, turned on her heel, and drove off in that white Lexus before I could even respond. I stood there in my driveway, heart pounding, and I remember thinking one thing clearly: she had never once shown me an actual number. Not a measurement, not a photo, not a form, just a threat and a deadline. And something about the way she said, "I measured it myself," instead of "the board measured it," felt wrong, like she was daring me to challenge her rather than actually citing evidence. That night I couldn't sleep. Mark found me at the kitchen table at 11:45, laptop open, rereading the HOA bylaws for the fourth time. "She can't just make up numbers," I told him. "There has to be a record somewhere." I didn't know yet how right I was or how deep that record went. The next morning, I emailed the HOA management company requesting, in writing, the exact measurements Diane claimed to have taken, along with a copy of my original April ARC submission. I CC'd 2 other board members whose emails I found in an old community newsletter. I figured a paper trail couldn't hurt. 3 days passed with silence. Then, on July 3rd, a certified letter arrived, not from the management company, from a law firm. Kessler, Voss and Nash Property Law Associates, on behalf of the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association Board of Directors. The letter cited a violation of Section 4.3, oversized accessory structure, alleged setback encroachment of 2 feet, and threatened a lien against my property if the structure wasn't removed within 14 days, plus recovery of the association's legal fees, estimated at $800 to $1,200. I read it twice, and on the second read I noticed something odd. The letterhead listed the firm's managing partner as D. Kessler-esque. Diane wasn't just the HOA president. She was married to, or maybe was herself, an attorney whose firm was now billing the very association she led to threaten me. That felt like it should be illegal, or at least deeply unethical, and it lit something in me that the yellow notice hadn't. I called Mark's cousin, Priya, who'd worked in property law for 6 years before switching to family law. She read the letter over the phone and went quiet for a second. "This is a conflict of interest," she said. "A board president shouldn't be directing legal action toward a homeowner through her own firm without disclosing that relationship. But conflict of interest complaints take months to resolve through the state. If you want to stop this now, you need documentation. Anything showing your shed was approved, or anything showing the board's own history with structures like yours." That's when I remembered something. 2 years earlier, before we'd even started the shed project, I'd stumbled across an old community Facebook group while researching Willow Creek before our purchase. Someone had posted before and after photos of their backyard renovation back in 2019, complete with a shed that looked, from what I remembered, remarkably similar in size to mine. I hadn't thought about it since. Now it felt like it might matter more than anything else. I spent that entire Saturday digging, not just through Facebook, but through the HOA's own online document portal, the one most residents never bothered to open past the dues payment page. Buried in a folder labeled Archived ARC Submissions 2017-2021, I found something that made my hands go cold. A 2019 architectural review request. Homeowner, the Prentice family, 3 doors down on Larkspur Court. Structure, a storage shed, 122 square feet, 9 feet 8 inches at the peak, 5 feet off the rear property line. Approved, signed, stamped with the board's seal. And the signature on the approval line wasn't some anonymous board secretary. It was Diane Kessler. Not only had Diane personally approved a shed larger than mine closer to the property line than mine 4 years earlier, but attached to that same digital file were 3 time-stamped photos. Submitted as part of the Prentice family's completion documentation, required by the HOA to close out any approved project. The photos showed the shed under construction, then finished, with a tape measure laid across the base in one image for verification purposes, a common HOA practice I hadn't even known still existed until I saw it. I sat there staring at my laptop screen for a long time. Diane Kessler had a documented, photographed, board-sealed history of approving a shed larger than mine, and she was now threatening to put a lien on my house over 2 feet of alleged encroachment she claimed to have personally measured. I downloaded every file. The 2019 ARC form. The approval signature page, all 3 time-stamped photos, my own April submission confirmation email, the 30-day non-objection clause from the bylaws screenshotted and highlighted. I built a folder and I labeled it, only half joking, Diane's problem. Mark looked over my shoulder as I organized it at 1 in the morning. "You're not just going to email this to her," he said. "You're going to bring it to a meeting." He was right. An email could be deleted, ignored, buried by Brenda in the management office. A folder in front of the entire board, in a room full of neighbors, on the record in the minutes, could not. The next scheduled board meeting was July 9th. a Tuesday 7 p.m. at the clubhouse. I emailed the HOA secretary requesting to be added to the agenda under homeowner comments, attached nothing, gave no hint of what was coming. I wanted Diane walking into that room exactly as confident as she'd been standing in my driveway. The days leading up to the meeting felt strange. Suspended, like the 14-day countdown on that certified letter, was a clock ticking toward two very different outcomes. Either I'd walk into that clubhouse and get steamrolled by procedure, buried under Robert's rules of order and board speak I didn't fully understand, or I'd walk out with something that actually mattered. I printed everything twice, once for the board, once as backup for myself, and I made a single-page timeline, dates only, no editorializing, because Priya told me boards respond better to timelines than to emotion. 2 days before the meeting, Diane sent one more message, this time an email, copied to the entire board distribution list, reiterating the 14-day deadline and adding a line that stuck with me. Some homeowners believe rules don't apply to them. This board exists to ensure they do. I read that line probably 10 times. I wasn't angry anymore by that point. I was almost calm, because I knew something she didn't, that in 6 days, everyone in that room was going to see exactly whose rules applied to whom. The clubhouse smelled like old coffee and carpet cleaner, folding chairs arranged in uneven rows, maybe 25 residents scattered among them, more than I expected for a routine Tuesday meeting. The 5-member board sat at a long table up front, Diane in the center chair, gavel resting beside a stack of papers, looking exactly as composed as she had in my driveway. Old business moved quickly, a pool maintenance vote, a landscaping contract renewal. Then the secretary called my name under homeowner comments, and I walked to the small podium with my folder, hands steadier than I expected them to be. "Thank you," I said. "I'm here regarding the violation notice and legal letter I received about my shed at 1147 Larkspur Court." I saw Diane's jaw tighten slightly. "I'd like to walk the board through the record." I laid out the timeline first, my April 2nd ARC submission, the 30-day non-objection window under Section 4.3. No written objection on file, confirmed by the management office's own records, which I'd requested and finally received 2 days earlier. Automatic approval. I held up the printed confirmation email. Then I said I was told this week that the shed exceeds size and setback limits, and that board president Kessler personally measured it. I'd like to know what those measurements were in writing, because none have been provided to me despite 3 requests. Diane leaned into her microphone. "The structure is visibly non-compliant, Mrs. Ellison. I don't need a tape measure to see that." "You didn't measure it," I said, not a question, a statement, a pause. "I assessed it," she said, tone sharpening. "Then I'd like to enter something else into the record," I said, and I opened the folder. I held up the 2019 ARC approval for the Prentice residence. I read the numbers aloud slowly. 122 square feet, 9 feet 8 inches at the peak. 5 feet from the rear line, larger and closer to the property line than mine. "Approved," I said, and signed by board president Diane Kessler. I heard someone in the folding chairs exhale audibly. I passed copies to each board member, and then I held up the 3 timestamped photos, the shed under construction, the finished structure, and the one with the tape measure laid across the base for verification. These photos were submitted by the Prentice family as part of their required completion documentation, per this board's own process. Board President Kessler approved a larger, closer structure 4 years ago and personally signed off on it. The room had gone completely silent except for the hum of the ceiling fan. One of the board members, an older man named Harold Vance who I'd never spoken to before, picked up the photo with the tape measure and studied it for a long moment before looking up at Diane. "Diane," he said, "did you sign this 2019 approval?" Diane's composure cracked for the first time since I'd known her. "I don't recall every submission from 4 years ago, Harold. We processed dozens of these." "Your signature is right here," Harold said, holding the page up. "Dated June 14, 2019. Another board member, a younger woman named Priscilla Ortiz, was already flipping through the certified letter Diane's firm had sent me. "This letter says the association authorized legal action," she said slowly. "I don't remember a vote on that." "Did the full board approve retaining Kessler, Voss, and Nash for this?" Silence. "I don't believe that vote happened," Priscilla said. "I think you authorized it yourself." For the next 20 minutes the meeting stopped being about my shed at all. It became about Diane. Harold moved to table the violation notice against my property pending a full review of the 2019 file, and the motion passed 4-1, Diane the lone no. Priscilla moved to request an itemized accounting of any legal fees already billed by Kessler, Voss, and Nash to the association, and to freeze any further engagement of that firm pending review, And that motion passed unanimously, including after a long pause Diane's own vote, because abstaining would have looked worse. I sat back down in the folding chair, folder in my lap, and for the first time in 3 months, I felt my shoulders actually drop. The following weeks moved faster than I expected. The board's review confirmed everything: my shed compliant, the Prentice shed compliant and precedent setting, and Diane's engagement of her own firm without a board vote a clear violation of the association's conflict of interest bylaw, Section 7(1), which I hadn't even known existed until Priya pointed it out. The violation notice against me was formally withdrawn in writing, and the certified letter was rescinded, with the association's insurance covering the $1,200 already billed rather than passing it to homeowners. Diane resigned from the board 3 weeks later, citing personal reasons in a 1-paragraph email to the community list. Nobody believed the personal reasons line, but nobody pushed back either. Harold Vance was voted in as interim president at the next meeting, and one of his first actions was to digitize and cross-reference every ARC approval on file so that no future board could claim ignorance of its own records again. Brenda, the management office worker, actually thanked me privately for the paper trail, said it was the first time in years anyone had made Diane answer a direct question in an open meeting. My shed is still standing in the back left corner of my yard, 6 feet off the property line, exactly where it's always been. Mark hung a small motion sensor light on it as a joke, said it deserved a spotlight after everything it survived. Sometimes I walk out to grab the mower and just stand there for a second looking at a structure that almost cost me $1,500 a month and a lien on my house. And I think about how close I came to just tearing it down out of fear instead of asking for the paperwork. That's really the whole lesson, if there is one. Rules only work when they apply to everyone, including the person holding the clipboard. I didn't win because I yelled louder or because I hired a lawyer of my own. I won because I asked for the receipts, and it turned out the person threatening me had already signed her own name to the truth 4 years earlier. If you've ever had a board, a boss, or anyone with a little bit of borrowed power try to bend a rule just for you, you already know how it feels to sit with that fear before you find the one piece of paper that changes everything. If this story felt like your own Tuesday night meeting, tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want more of these, the neighbors, the notices, the quiet homeowners who turn out to have the receipts, stick around. Because Willow Creek was not the only story like this one, not even close.